Hi there and welcome back to the Silverbird Selection. After a week or so of not doing any game reviews, I'm back with a game review, and today I'm looking at an Activision classic originally released on the Atari 2600 in 1982 and then ported over to the Commodore 64 in 84 by Activision. It is Pitfall, which was then re-released by Silverbird or Firebird on their packaging in about 1987. So fairly rare game to find in this packaging. It's pretty common in the original Activision packaging, but in this packaging pretty rare, and handily I got my copy as part of a bundle, so it only cost me £1.55. So Pitfall, I think you're probably all familiar with it, but let's give it a go and see how it plays on the Commodore 64. Let's begin as we always do by looking at the packaging and the front cover in particular. And it's the normal Silver Range packaging. We won't go into too much detail because you must be bored of this by now. So you can see we've got the Pitfall logo quite nicely done with a sort of gradient fill on it. We've got Pitfall Harry there swinging on his rope, and you can also see like a river and some crocodiles and stuff in the background. So very representative of what's in the game itself. Spine's got that same logo on as well, and the back cover's got two screenshots which should be very familiar to any retro gamers. And a brief description about how to play the game: dodge the jungle jeopardies and grab the treasure in this action-packed adventure. Okay, let's take a quick look inside as well then, as usual, and you can see the list of Silver Range games there, fairly comprehensive by this point. We've got the mail order information, so we'll skip over that quite quickly, and we'll see that it says Pitfall is copyright 1986 David Crane, which is a bit strange because the game definitely didn't come out in 1986. Anyway, it says the game, you are Pitfall Harry, adventurer, treasure hunter and explorer. You must negotiate your way through the natural hazards and avoid deadly creatures that inhabit the inhospitable jungle and the subterranean maze to get to the treasure that awaits you. Then you've got the loading instructions, and then the gameplay instructions, joystick controls, tells you what to do, how to swing across the vines. Also mentions that you start with 2,000 points, you'll lose 100 points every time you fall down a hole. You've got 3 lives, but there are various things that will cause you to lose them, and you've got 20 minutes in which to collect as much treasure as possible. It then also gives you a hint about how to jump across the crocodiles, which I think anyone who's played Pitfall before would already know. So the game's loading in here. We can see the loading screen. We've seen this before with some of the other Activision games re-released by Firebird. They've actually created a nice loading screen for them which mentions both Firebird and Activision. Interesting message at the bottom there saying please remove any cart, e.g. fast load or other variants of such things. And of course you can see it says Pitfall there at the bottom as well. So not really spectacular, but a nice touch to give something to this release that wasn't on the original release. Okay, so here's the game loaded, presented with the regular screen that you expect from these early Activision games. Just got the scrolling message across the bottom there, Pitfall by David Crane. The Activision logo coming across now. Press F1 to start, it says, which we'll do in a moment. Not sure if there's any other information. Nope, that's pretty much it. So nothing more in the presentation side. There's no title screen, no music or anything like that. It's a very straightforward, simplistic sort of game because it's pretty much just a port of the Atari 2600 version. So let's get started with the game. And as described in the instructions, you get 20 minutes to find as much treasure as you can. I'm sure I'm pretty much preaching to the converted here with how you play Pitfall, but you can move left and right using the joystick. You can move down the ladders and up the ladders. You can also fall down the hole, but if you do that you lose 100 points, as you've probably just seen. So we'll try not to do that too much. And it's a flick screen, kind of a platform game I suppose you'd call it, although there's not a great deal of platforming involved in it. It's more kind of adventure based. So here's the first obstacle you come across, which again doesn't kill you. It's barrels. They just eat away some of your score. You then got things that will kill you, like this tar pit that will kill you if you drop into it, so you've got to instead jump on the rope and then jump off the other side. And you've also got the crocodiles. They only kill you if the mouths are open, so the trick to this, if you didn't know, is you wait till they're closed. Oops, and try not to fall in the water like I just did there. That wasn't a very good demonstration. You can stand on the crocodile's heads, like I just did there, and they don't kill you when that happens. So that's how you get across them. That's the closest you've got really to proper sort of precision platforming in the game. Ooh. That to me is a bit of a bug, that as soon as you walk onto a screen there's a barrel rolling over you. So not too happy about that, but this demonstration is not going to be a particularly good high score run in all honesty. We'll get to the underneath bit of these levels in due course, but I want to start by just getting some treasure. So here you've got another adversary to jump over, which is a snake, quite easily done. And here's the first bit of treasure. It's that bar that's supposedly shining, I suppose. I don't really know exactly what that's supposed to be. Maybe a gold bar. So here you've got an expanding and contracting pool that you have to negotiate, which is pretty obvious how you do it. You wait till it contracts. You run like crazy. You jump at the end, and there you go. I've got my first bit of treasure. So that's pretty much it for how you play the game. There's only a very small variety of different screens. It just kind of varies from one to another, whether there's more or less barrels, whether there's a rope, whether there's a tar pit, whether there's crocodiles. It doesn't change too much. Here you can see you've got a combination of barrels and the expanding and contracting lake. And that's about as challenging as it gets on the upper levels. Now, the real key to the game... Oops. Bloody hell, that wasn't very good, was it? The real trick to the game, however, is to use the lower half of the screen to traverse, because... Oh! I'm not going to make it. I'm going to make it. Because the top half of the screen, if you just use the top half, which is a lot easier to negotiate, then basically you can't complete the game. You can't collect all the treasure in the 20 minutes. To do that, you've got to move along the lower levels, because although they look like they're joined together, the lower levels actually, I think, traverse you 4 of the upper levels when you use them. So let's just try and get across these crocodiles without making any mistakes. I've got no lives left. There we go, that's how you're supposed to do it. So here we can show an example, hopefully. So if we look on this onto the left of this screen here, that's got the crocodiles on. But if I go down the ladder and back to the left here, you can see the crocodiles aren't there because it's skipped back. I think it's 4 screens for every one underneath bit, if that makes sense. Now the problem with traversing the underneath bit is jumping over the scorpions, which I'm not very good at, and it seems to be a very pixel perfect thing that you have to do in this version of the game, which makes it quite challenging. At some point I'm going to have to do it just to try and demonstrate it, and I'm probably going to lose my last life when I do that. What I'm trying to do first though is find a little bit of treasure. There's that problem again with a barrel arriving at your feet almost immediately. I don't think that happens in the Atari 2600 version. So let's just talk graphics for a minute. There's another obstacle to avoid here, which is the fire. Graphics are very similar to the Atari 2600 version, a little bit more definition in the trees. The colour scheme's a little bit different as well. For some reason, Pitfall Harry is black trousers and a blue top and black hair, whereas he had green clothes and a pink face and brown hair, I think, in the 2600 version. But generally speaking, they're no different, and there's certainly no great improvement for the most part on the Atari 2600 graphics, even though the Commodore 64 was definitely capable of better. Oh, that was lucky. Losing more health from the barrels, or more points I should say, but I don't really care about that. Oh, this is an interesting combination. You've got all kinds of things going on here. Oh dear, I've messed it up, and that's killed me off without me finding any more treasure. That was a bit crap, to be honest, because I'm not very good at Pitfall. Is there any point me showing you any more? I mean, the treasures, they do vary. There's different things to collect: money bags, diamonds, things like that, but really it's not much different. What I didn't do though was try and negotiate the lower part of the level, so let's just give that a little go. I'll show you how bad I am at that. So the jumping over these scorpions has to be pretty much pixel perfect, because as soon as you jump over them, as you see there, they turn around and chase you, and if you haven't jumped cleanly over them, then you hit them and immediately die. So that's really not very good game design, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't that precise on the 2600, so it's a bit of a flaw in this version of the game in my opinion. Another flaw I've noticed, and I'll point this out when we get back to this side, over to this side, when the rope's swinging, when it goes from left to right, sorry, from right to left, well, actually it's both directions, there's a little bit where a bit of the rope's like kind of missing and left behind. I don't know if you can spot that on the video, but yeah, that's a bit of a strange thing that's going on. I'm not quite sure why, but there you go. So I'll try and find another bit where I can go underneath, but I wasn't really intending to play another round of it, but I did a bit rubbish the first go, so so yeah, I think Pitfall, it's obviously a classic, there's no doubt about that. Certainly when it came out on the Atari 2600 it was a groundbreaking game, but in the cold light of day, almost 40 years later, it's not that great. It's not aged especially well. There we go, I managed to jump over the scorpion this time. So this is your route to getting through the levels or through the landscape quite quickly. But there you go, see, literally just touched my sort of trailing foot and I've lost another life. Managed to make it over that one. The thing is, if you leave it too late to jump, you'll just jump into the scorpion's face. There you go, it's got me. I mean, that just seems completely unfair, so I'm not going to play anymore. Didn't see me get any more treasure, but I've had enough of it, to be honest. So let's move on to the review scores, and you can probably guess they're not going to be too glowing for this game. So packaging I think was pretty decent. I mean, it's got an image of Pitfall on the front of it and the instructions inside. Nothing to really complain about, but nothing outstanding. I'm going to go 7 out of 10 for the packaging. Presentation, very basic. They had that loading screen which wasn't really up to much, and the in-game presentation is very basic as well, with just a scrolling message. It's what you come to expect from these early Activision games, but nothing special at all. So 5 for the presentation. Graphics, again, pretty basic. They are the Atari 2600 graphics with a little bit of embellishment with the trees and the bushes, but not much else. So I'm going to go with 5 out of 10 for the graphics as well. Sound is also very basic, no music, very basic sort of effects of him running and jumping. So I suppose there was a little bit of music when you die, but that's not really very well done either. So 4 out of 10 for the sound. And finally, let's move on to playability, which, as I've said, I don't think is great. I think this is an example where it was a really groundbreaking game in 1982, an iconic platformer if you like, but even just a couple of years later when it made it to the Commodore 64, it would have been quite dated looking. I think by then you'd got the games like Monty Mole and Impossible Mission and Bruce Lee coming along. So within a couple of years, by the time it was certainly re-released by Firebird in 1986, it would have looked particularly dated, I think. So playability wise, it's fairly playable, but you've seen all you're going to see in the game within maybe 5 or 6 screens, maybe 8 at most. So it's just a high score chase really, and I don't think it gives you objects to collect, treasure to collect enough times to give you the sort of impetus to keep trying. I think it becomes boring before you get any sort of high score that you'd really want to challenge for. Now, back in the Atari 2600 days, when there weren't many games to choose from, games cost you $20 or $30 and nearly all of them were high score challenge type games. I think this was perfectly acceptable, but I think platforming games became more about exploration by the time we got to the Commodore 64 era, and the exploration in this isn't particularly great. So saying all that, I'm going to give it a playability score of 6, which gives it an overall score of 5.9, and as you probably guessed, I think even for $1.99 this wasn't a great purchase back in 1986, and certainly looking at it over 30 years later, it's just not that great anymore, unfortunately. There are way better games that were available at this point in time on the Commodore 64, not to mention the NES would have been around with games like Mario, and obviously arcade games were very good by then as well, with stuff like Ghosts and Goblins and Wonder Boy and things like that. So I just think Pitfall, you know, very much of its time, definitely an iconic classic game and a groundbreaking game that Activision came out with on the Atari 2600, but this port of it is not really up to much. So you might find that a bit controversial and have some arguments against it. If you've got them, then please let me know in the comments, or otherwise let me know what you think of Pitfall in general. Okay, that's another game review completed then, and it means it's time for you guys to help me choose another game to review in a future video. The theme this time is motorbikes, or games with motorbikes in them. So the choices this time are International Speedway or Stunt Bike Simulator. Two quite different games, I think, but both featuring motorbikes. So let me know in the comments which of those two games you'd like me to play, and I'll play that in a future video. As always, please let me know what you think about the game I've just reviewed as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.